You're listening to the Free to Be Mindful podcast, which invites you along on a journey to learn of mindful living, grow in mental health, and inspire through personal growth. In a world where we can often feel much stress and overwhelm, this podcast provides bite-sized tips and real talk conversations, empowering you to embrace mindfulness and nurture your full potential. I'm your host, Vanessa de Jesus Guzman, licensed therapist, retired educator, entrepreneur, and mom of two. I'm passionate about helping busy moms reduce the overwhelm and to live life intentionally without losing their, well, here we go. Hello and welcome back to the Free to Be Mindful podcast. I hope that you're feeling good, looking good, and doing better in this world than you were yesterday. So today we have a guest by the name of Tanya Chavez. Tanya is a facilitator, speaker, and leadership expert who turns the principles of, get this, indoor skydiving into transformative leadership lessons. You heard it right, indoor skydiving. She's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy with a background as a military jumpmaster, competitive skydiver, and intelligence officer, and a corporate leader at the Gallo family companies. And with that experience, she brings a unique blend of courage, camaraderie, and high performance strategies to the table, infusing fun, creativity into the journey towards excellence. When I first met Tanya, I was absolutely floored by not only just what a beautiful person she is, but what a badass she is. And you're going to love all of the things she has, all of the skills and the strategies that she has, not only as a person, but as a woman looking into leadership. And then, of course, as a mom, because believe it or not, all of these skills are intertwined. And in addition to all of that, Tanya is also an executive coach for top firms like Google and PayPal, and she's a lecturer in UC Berkeley's MBA program. I love how she truly guides leaders and teams to push their boundaries to achieve peak performance, proving that sky's not the limit and it's just the beginning. I really, really hope that you enjoy this episode. And of course, we put everything in the show notes, but you may even want to grab a paper and pencil to write down the strategies that she provides because you're in such alignment with the work that I do also. I hope you enjoy. Tanya, welcome to the Free to Be Mindful podcast. I'm so glad you're with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Vanessa. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you. And listen, reading your bio, everything that you do, of course, and I'm sure it doesn't only happen with me, the number one thing that stands out is the skydiving. Like, how cool is that? I want you to tell us a little bit more about that, but start by telling us a little bit more about yourself, and then let's slide into that because you have quite a story.
Oh, well, thank you. I honestly, that is such a foundation to my story because now I'm an executive coach, and it's based off of my time on the Air Force skydiving team, and then moving into being an intelligence officer, and then I was a corporate leader in the wine and spirits industry for 10 years. But none of that would have happened if I did not have that time on the Air Force parachute team. It quite literally changed the trajectory of my life.
That is amazing, amazing. And can you describe to us, because it's something I always wanted to do and I still want to do it, but now I'm scared because I'm a mom and, my two kids need me. Tell us a little bit like that feeling when you're actually about to go. What is that like?
Oh my goodness. It is quite literally overriding your fight or flight fear response. Because the very unique thing about the Air Force Academy is it's one of the only places, actually, it's the only place in the world where your first skydive is 100% solo and you're pulling your own parachute.
Stop it. Your first one?
Very first one. Yep. And you do that after only 3 days of ground training. So you are really quickly learning how to put your fear in check, summon the courage to let go of an airplane, or like physically let go of a perfectly good airplane. And I remember on my first jump, I wanted to be the first one to go because I didn't want to see other people falling away. And I wasn't, of course.
I like
So
that
I'm
strategy though.
yes. So I am sitting on the bench and I am just watching one at a time these people letting go of an airplane. And I remember thinking, I've done the training, I know my stuff, but how do you physically let go of an airplane? Like, I don't get it. I just don't get it. So I remember once it was my turn, my jump master said to me, they do a gear check and they start to get into a flow, like into a process.
Okay.
And they ask you if you're ready to jump. You say free fall. They do a gear check. And then once it's time, they tell you to stand in the door. And so you start getting in the door, and there's a whole process. You don't get to just dive out and try to bypass your fear. No, you have to really face it.
Oh,
And
wow.
you're going right hand, right foot, left hand, left foot as you get into the door. And then you stick your whole body out of the aircraft, like pretty much as you can into the windstream.
Oh,
And if
yeah.
you don't, your jump master will kind of push your hips out. So that way your body is hitting the wind as much as possible. And at this point, you're staring directly into the propeller and you're hanging out of an airplane. And so then you check in with your jump master and they tell you to go. And then you say prop up, down, and then you go arch 1,000, 2,000, and it gets you into your body position. So that's when you
Okay.
let go. And I remember very clearly thinking, I'm not going to let go. There's no way my body will let me do that. But once I was in the process and I did the whole right hand, right foot thing, I let go. And I
Wow.
said arch 1,000. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, oh my gosh, I actually did it. I completely lost count. I should probably pull my parachute, and then pulled my parachute like 6 seconds later when you were supposed to free fall for 10. So all
Oh,
that to say, it is quite terrifying and exhilarating all at the same time.
I can't even imagine. When you said they asked you, "Are you ready?" I'd be like, "No, no, no. I need a second. Like, give me a moment. Hold on a second." And I'm sure that's not an option, right? Like, you're just supposed to go right after they ask you those questions.
Yes, absolutely. And part of it is you practice that on the ground so much, even
Okay.
down to them saying, are you ready to jump? And you yell free fall. So that
Okay.
once you kind of hit that process, you're just going. At that point, it's just muscle
Autopilot.
memory.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow. And as you're talking, even though I'm trying to like, I see the picture and trying to picture myself on top of like, not on top of the airplane, but in the airplane with like the winds of your body out. And it sounds like it's this really, it is a quite a special thing I'm imagining because not people don't do that. Well, people probably do that every day, but average people don't do that every day. However, we do face our fears every day in a very different way, not necessarily jumping out of an airplane, but our bodies may react to things as though we're jumping out of an airplane. Do you encounter that kind of processes in the work that you do now?
100%. 100%. And honestly, even when I was on the skydiving team, the number one thing it taught me was self-regulation. Was
Mm,
how do I start to override my nervous system? Because my nervous system doesn't know if I'm jumping out of an airplane or not. Like I
right.
can feel it triggered when I hear my email ding too many times, when my kids refuse dinner for the 10th time in a row. I mean, there are so many little things that give me that same sensation. And I remember as I became a jump master and I started to hold space for people that were going through their literal skydives, that started getting me to think, well, what skydives are people really going through in their day-to-day life? And how do I unlock their potential by pushing them to that edge and helping them jump so they can start to see their potential and start to see, what they're actually capable of? And honestly, that started with me, right? So you said, well, what is it that helps you override that in your day-to-day life? I'm doing that all the time now. But when I was at the academy, I honestly don't know how I ended up there. I was always intrigued by leadership. I was intrigued by the military, but I showed up and was like, I don't belong here. I'm terrified of being in leadership
Oh my
positions.
goodness.
It's so vulnerable. Like you open yourself up to criticism, you very rarely get praise. And so I quite literally turned down leadership positions to flip burgers. So when I was at
No
the Air Force
way.
Academy, yeah, totally, 100%. So I told myself, this is what I convinced myself of. I don't want to be a squadron commander. I don't want to take these leadership positions or take on these challenges. I just want to have fun while I'm here. So I'm going to be the MWR officer and I'm going to flip burgers at the tailgate. That is literally what I'm going to do.
Oh my goodness.
So I did that my entire time at the academy and I tried everything I could to not be in leadership positions. But
Wow.
then when I was on the skydiving team, I had no choice. I had to become a jump master. That's part of your duties. Your number one role is like we jump into air shows, we compete as well, but our number one job is to teach other people how to skydive so they can earn their military jump wings. And so
Okay.
then I had to learn how to like hold space for people, how to stand into my own and be confident even if I'm scared. And that's what changed everything for me. Because once I got into the Air Force and people started pushing me into these really challenging leadership roles, I didn't say no. Whereas
You
before, I
just
would
did
have
it.
found a way to say, yes, I was terrified. I got that same like pit in my stomach, but I would trusted that I knew how to keep fear out of the driver's seat, keep it in the passenger seat, and move forward anyway.
Wow. And I mean, that shows up in our lives in so many ways on a daily basis because so often, if it's not one thing, it's another that we are scared of, whether it be, I don't know, I'm scared of ants. Not scared, I just don't like them in big clusters. They freak me out. So not just a fear in that sense of the word, but I mean, listeners and watchers, like really think about how many things have you stopped yourself from doing because you had a fear factor of some sort that you were like, no, I'd rather go flip burgers than take on this leadership role and not know where your life can go if you just take that chance.
Yes. Yeah. And it's not just fear, like the same, because fear, it's like your nervous system is overridden. And one
Right.
thing I found as I got older is that fear sometimes got replaced with overwhelm. And I
Mm,
realized I'm not actually taking enough risks or doing enough things that make me feel alive. It's just overwhelm that's like frying my nervous system. So being able to learn how to calm that down, not just for myself, but also as I stepped into like leadership roles, right? Like you people take on the role of the leader. So if you're an anxious energy, they're going to take that on.
right.
So being the calm in the storm and learning how to override that was so helpful as I moved into a leadership role, and then really helpful when I became a mom. It took me some time to get used to it because it's constant stimulation when you become a mom, but it at least gave me the tools to be able to recognize what was happening and work on overriding that response.
When you were saying that, I'm biting my tongue because I'm like, oh my goodness, I want to jump right into it because, yes, in motherhood, like that's exactly what happens. But I do want to hold that thought. And then we're going to transition totally
Okay.
into motherhood. So, as an executive coach now and being a leader, how do you help people in your position now?
Yeah. So everybody, whether they realize it or not, or want to admit it or not, it's almost always some sort of fear that's stopping them.
Mm,
Whether it's a fear of judgment or they're scared to try something new, because as you move up, you have all eyes on you. So even if you know you need to embrace discomfort to grow, you feel like, well, what if I look stupid in front of my team?
right.
Like, what are they going to think of me? Am I going to lose political capital? So you're all of a sudden terrified of all this judgment. And so being able to help override that is super helpful. And there's physical ways to do that. And then there's some mindset shifts to do that. And so one thing I talk about a lot with my clients is I feel like a lot of them end up in this firefighting, which is basically your body's in fight or flight. So they are firefighting constantly. They want to be more strategic and they don't know how to slow things down. And so there, I encourage them to create more space. And it's hard to do because
Yeah.
you're busy. You have a million emails thrown at you. You're going to back meetings. And being able to create space first, just in these tiny little micro moments, like, can you shut down your email for 2 minutes,
Mm,
close your eyes at your desk, and just take a couple deep belly breaths?
mm-hmm.
So often we're up here. We don't even notice we're up here.
Yep.
And so, can you just drop into it and just reset your nervous system a bit so you're seeing things clearly and you can react appropriately? And little by little, you start wedging more and more space there. So, it starts with like zooming in. I call it zooming in to zoom out. Like, where can you zoom in to, even if it's visual, right? Like, let's say you're talking to somebody across from you and you can feel your nervous system starting to rise, right? Maybe it's you're sitting in a performance assessment with your boss or
Mm,
you're asking for a raise. Can you look at their shirt and really notice the pattern on their shirt? What are the details that you can see there? What's the fabric made of? And as you do that, it doesn't take very long.
right.
Then you're able to zoom out and you can see the situation more clearly and react appropriately.
Absolutely. I love all of these tips because this is what I'm doing almost every single day in the therapeutic room with kids and with moms is really using a lot of these techniques so that people don't get stressed out or don't get overly upset or overly anxious about these things that, yes, they may scare us, but again, like you said, it's putting us in that mode like, oh my goodness, what's happening? But we can totally ground ourselves and get through it. You said firefighting, so just to bring that to people in case they didn't understand that it's putting out these small fires. So again, how many emails do you have where you got that triggering email from the boss or the person who should know what they're doing when they're not, and you want to be like, "As for my last email," and it's like frivolously on the email, or when you are, and we'll get to motherhood, but when you're repeating yourself a bazillion times, all of those things can be small triggers. So first, having that awareness of like what even triggers you to begin with. And then when you do find yourself like asking for that raise or whatever it is, grounding yourself so that you can be in your body and not outside of your own mind. And that's done as easily as you stated, like look at different colors, different textures, different shapes to bring yourself where your feet are, bring your mind back like inside your body, and then refocus. And you can do that with kids, and you can do that obviously with adults.
100%. And the one thing I would say is it takes practice
Yes.
to be present. And so the other thing I work with them on is yes, you need to be able to handle that in those moments of firefighting, but you also should be proactive about it. So can you
Mm-hmm.
find an anchor or a trigger point that will remind you to practice this in moments of peace? So that when you're in these stressful moments, your brain is rerouted. It's like, I
Yeah.
have access to this ability. So, like, I know we said we'll get to motherhood, but I always love this example is when I am at the car, right? When I'm driving, my kids are usually talking at me a mile a minute.
Yep.
It's just a lot. And they're usually talking over each other, trying to get my attention. They want a toy, a fruit pouch, whatever. When I step out of that car, that is almost always my trigger to just take a moment. Maybe I can barely hear my kids in the background because they're still talking in the car, but I have a minute. I shouldn't say a minute. I have 10 seconds
A
to take
second.
10, like, yes, exactly. 3 deep belly breaths as I walk over to get them out of their car seat. So, can
Yeah.
you find that moment of peace that helps you train your brain, train your body so that when you're in that stressful moment, you're in that skydive, if you will, your muscle memory can kick in?
I love that because yes, it doesn't come right away. That reaction usually comes right away, but that's because we have all of this practice of reacting all of our lives. That's why we all go to that. But it is a because it's really all mindfulness, regardless of using different terms. It is all a mindfulness practice. And I love the way that you use the word trigger because sometimes trigger has a negative connotation, but you said find what triggers you to make it a positive, to find that moment, to take those 3 belly breaths before reacting. So instead, you could respond appropriately. Think about it. And this is for listeners and watchers. If you are, I don't know how to swim, so that really scares me. This is always the example that I go to. If somebody goes and like pushes me into, the deep end of the pool, is that when I'm going to practice my whatever, I don't know, whatever stroke, whatever, whatever way it is that people swim? Is that when I'm going to practice when I'm on the deep end? Or am I practicing every day on the shallow end until I finally master the deep end? I haven't done that literally, but figuratively, in terms of mindfulness, it does take a practice. And we're never perfect because it's an ongoing life thing.
100%, 100%. And there's one thing that I do have to share on this leadership topic because a client brought this to my attention that I thought was so amazing. Because at first you're just finding these little micro moments, right? Like we just talked about, and practicing in the shallow end before you jump into the deep end. And she got so good at practicing this. She was probably my most frazzled client that I started
No
with. And I
way.
remember thinking, like, I don't know how I'm going to get her out of this. She just is stuck and buried. By the end of our time together, actually in the middle of our time together, she came up with a very practical thing because she was able to start to see things clearly as she practiced mindfulness and as she was able to get into herself again. And she realized that meetings, no matter what, let's say there was a meeting that started at 8 and was scheduled to end at 8:25 or
Okay.
scheduled to end at 8:55. They always go to the half hour or the hour. It doesn't matter. They just bleed over. It's just, I don't
Yeah.
know, human nature. So she started scheduling all her meetings 5 after because
Oh,
nobody scheduled meetings or nobody started meetings early. So that gave her 5 minutes to reset herself between meetings. So she was able to
wow.
increase that space. It started out as very small, just these little micro moments. Then she started to see what was in her control and she was able to create more space for herself in a way that wasn't disrupting other people, right? In a way that wasn't ruining her political capital.
Yeah.
And then by the end of our time together, she became fully strategic. Like she started setting up coffees again with her team. She was able to listen and hold space for them. And so it was so beautiful to watch her go from this frazzled, like, I can't see clearly, to let me be strategic again. Let me operate from a wise, grounded place.
That is such a great thing. I'm happy for her because so often we do have these things that we can control, but we often think of the things that we can't control and say, no, I can't do it. Like it's just not going to work. And it goes with the very unpopular opinion. that we really have more control than we think over our responses than we usually think, like, no, people are going to trigger us. And this is why I react this way because you didn't listen or because you did this again. But we really do have a lot of that within our control. And look at that, just shifting a meeting 5 minutes after within your control, and then how that changes the trajectory of that meeting and probably your day, I'm assuming.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And I think people, they don't want to admit that they have more control than they do because that's
Right.
scary. Because then that means you actually have to do something about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's easier to go the other way than to be like, all right, like, let's become aware of what we can do. And sometimes we don't become aware, but motherhood just pushes that, like the skydiving, like it just pushes that us into that wind. And then here we are. And now what are we going to do? So we made a lot of correlations already as to how skydiving and your position now really overlaps with motherhood, and we see a lot of these same things.
Yes. Yes. And I would say the thing that's slightly different is it seems like it's, at least for me, it was less about fear and more about overwhelm. It's just this
Mm-hmm.
constant stimulus. And so finding those moments where you can just take a minute, or not even a minute. Like one thing I noticed was when I'm folding laundry, I stop breathing. I don't know why. I think it's because I think all moms do this. You have this anxious running to-do list in your head. Like,
Yep.
I got to keep moving. I have stuff to do. I don't have time to fold these clothes. But once I realized how much I wasn't breathing, I took those tools into practice. I took a micro moment, right? I was able to, and this happens every time. I don't know why. I still forget to breathe when I'm doing laundry. And so all of a sudden now I'm starting to take deep breaths. I'll take a look at the fabric. I'll notice what it feels like on my fingertips. And I
Mm.
may only get 30 seconds of that before I have like a person tugging at my shirt. But that all adds up. And I think that's where we mess up sometimes in motherhood, is because before kids, we don't realize how much margin we have. I had
Right.
a rough day. I'm going to go to a yoga class.
Mm-hmm.
I had my huge morning routine where I would meditate, take my dog for a walk, squeeze in a workout. And if one of those was thrown off, I was annoyed because
Right.
I'm like, no, I need
You
that
had your thing.
foundation. Exactly. But kids threw all of that out the window. Like I mentioned before we started recording, I didn't even have the opportunity for a full night's sleep for like 4 years because my kids are just terrible sleepers no matter what we did. So I had to learn how to control those micro moments because there's so much out of your control 24/7. And I think at least made this mistake. I threw out the power of these micro moments because
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't have the full thing. I couldn't have a
Right.
full sleep hygiene. So I think the important thing here is to take advantage of them and give yourself grace when you can't have that hour long workout or whatever it is that usually grounds you. Be
Yeah.
okay with those little micro moments and trust that it's not forever. It's just a season.
Yes, yes. And these seasons change. And as you stated, like it may not be fear. Sometimes it's scary. It's depending on what's in that diaper may be scary, but what's on that report card may be scary. The middle school drama may be scary. But it really is the concept of overwhelm, because whether it's what I'm in right now of not getting enough sleep because I have, an infant right now, or when toddlers are putting things up their nose or in their ears that they really shouldn't, and you need to take that trip to the ER, or as I stated, that middle school drama and who's not my friend. And if you have, another child who bullies your child and what to take action on that, or that high schooler that wants to experiment with things that they know they perhaps shouldn't, but they do. And then they need to make that tough phone call to you, and you need to pick them up when you should probably be sleeping, or when they're out of the house and you don't know what's happening. And then you're left with a lot of unknown. There's pieces of overwhelm. Some people say, like, oh, bigger kids, bigger problems, or like, oh, no, it's easy when they're smaller. But I think it's just a different season of life that we all face. And they go through similar stages, but the choices that they make are quite interesting that bring a lot of to that overwhelm. And something that you really mentioned is letting go of what things look like or used to look like so that you can appreciate the micro moments. Because, yes, I remember going to one gym class, two gym classes, and feeling good, or to go to happy hour. And now my happy hour is with a different kind of bottle, a baby bottle. So it's letting go of the expectations of, like, I want to do this and this is what I used to do. but now I'm a different version of myself. And if I just, pick up on this 30 seconds or 1 minute, how I can reach that same thing without it looking how it used to. It's just kind of like reformatting it, letting go of the expectations and allowing for something new.
Yes, 100%. And that was really, really hard for me because sometimes I miss that person that I used to be.
Yeah.
But it is so different. And I had the audacity to say I was so busy and so overwhelmed before having kids.
You didn't
And
even
now I'm
know,
like, oh, this
Tanya.
is so different. Yes. And the thing I noticed too, because this reminded me of how we're talking about mindfulness and trying to calm our nervous systems, but when I was really tired, one of the things I noticed the most was when I am present, which is hard sometimes because sometimes when I'm laying on the floor playing with my kids, I'm thinking about a million other things.
Right. All the things you have to do.
Exactly. But if you're able to get in the moment and appreciate it in the moment when it's happening, I notice some of the tiredness will go away because so
Mm,
much of the tiredness I feel like is my brain is just worrying and wondering about all the things I have to do, but that
yeah.
does no good except drain my energy. And it's like you got to give yourself some grace because at some point you're going to want to scroll through your phone while you're sitting there on there playing with your kids. Like that's going to happen. But if you can just squeeze in these tiny micro moments of presence, like it does wonders for being able to bring you back and refill your soul in ways that are different than they were before having kids.
Yes, I'm hearing like shifting that mindset of like instead of focusing on the tiredness, it's not going to go away, but focusing on something else. So that's almost like distracting yourself from like that space of I'm so tired to like look at how beautifully my kid is playing for these 30 seconds and appreciating that micro moment. And when we do more of that, then we're really appreciating our kids in the stages that they're in before they're off to school, before they are off on a date, before they're driving and then out of the house. How
Oh my
quickly it
gosh,
all happens.
that just gave me chills because I can't even imagine some of those milestones that you just mentioned. I'm just trying to get over my son being in school for a full day.
You're doing great, Mama. You're doing great. So all of these things, we started talking about skydiving and then your executive coaching, and I hope that listeners really hear the through line even into motherhood that it's dealing with the same types of things, even though the labels of them change, right? Jumping out of an airplane, being a leader, even though you feel you're not ready, and then mothering. The labels change, but our feelings and the things that we go through and how we can go through them and accomplish them are similar or all the same.
Yes, yes. And because it doesn't matter what the trigger is, your body reacts that way. So learning how to override that is so, so helpful to get you into a more peaceful, flow, calm state. If you could have something that's a physical
Mm.
anchor, can be so helpful. Like this is, I feel like the position of motherhood and being a working mom is you have your professional self and your mom self. And sometimes it feels like those can be at odds. And you're always thinking about one or the other, depending on where you're at, you're thinking about the other thing. So I
Mm-hmm.
actually use my rings as my anchor. So I have my wedding ring on one hand, and when I'm transitioning into family, it helps remind me what matters. Like, how do I want to show up? What is the value that I'm trying to bring in? How do I want my kids to feel when they're around me? And I really pay attention to what those rings feel like under my thumb. And then it doesn't take long. It can be on the walk out of the office. And then I do the same thing with my Air Force Academy ring because I never thought I could do the things that I ended up doing. And like I said, the Air Force skydiving team quite literally changed the trajectory of my life because it changed the
Yeah.
way I saw myself and what I was capable of. And so the Air Force Academy ring reminds me of how much power I really do have. And if I ever need to lean on that, that's what I use to rub to remind myself that I have a lot of control, I have a lot of power, and I have the confidence to do it. So
Tanya,
having
that's
that type
so
of anchor is so helpful.
special. That is amazing. And you can, I mean, it takes it so much further when you put meaning behind your anchor because then it touches home, right? Because it comes from your heart. I was thinking about when I do public speaking, I usually have something in my hand, even as simple as a pen, no meaning or no deep sentimental thing, on that pen, but it's just that anchor that holds me, that keeps my hands from shaking, even though I feel like I'm writing and I don't feel nervous in my brain, but my body still goes through it. And that's what anchors me down. So we're giving you different examples so that you can think about, well, what is it that I already have at my disposal? Because it's not an extra thing that we're asking you to add to your plate, but just pay attention to the things that are already there to help you get through whatever it is, the stage of life or the transition even from going from professional life to motherhood.
Oh, I love the way you worded that because you already have what you need and you have the time that you need. And there's
Yeah.
no you can't. I used to use, like I said before, I used to use like, well, I'm not getting my 20-minute meditation in, I'm not getting 8 hours of sleep in, I'm not. No, you have what you need right now to get you through the season that you're
Absolutely. So in this, you have two children
in.
and
Mhm.
a busy stage of life. How do you, or what are the things that you use for yourself in order to be a little bit more mindful and take appreciation of these micro moments, like you stated?
Yeah. So for me, this is interesting because this one's actually kind of tied back to skydiving, and I didn't even realize it. Is one of the biggest things that I realize gets me into the present moment is when I shift the spotlight. So
Mm,
I'll explain how this ties to motherhood in a second. But I remember the first time I was a jump master, where I'm physically putting people out of the airplane. I
okay.
was 20 years old at the time, and I'm responsible for these people on the airplane. I tell the pilots where to fly. I mean, it is literally just me
Wow.
back there. And I remember being in the bathroom being terrified. I thought skydiving was terrifying. No, no, no. This was far more terrifying to me. And I'm like pacing in the bathroom and I feel like I'm going to throw up and I'm running out of time. I got to get to the gear up area and start my briefing. I remember walking out and I see a door there and it has that like tiny little window, like the old school
Uh-huh.
conference rooms have with like the little
That you
X's
could
on
see
it, the black
through.
X's. Yes. And so I'm looking out there and I see the students lined up. They're getting ready for their first jump. They're geared up and they look terrified. And so I'm looking at them in the face, right? And I can see like, oh my gosh, they need me to step into being a jump master. That's what they need me to do right now. I've been trained. I'm qualified to do this. Yes, I'm scared, but that doesn't mean I'm not qualified to be here and to
Mm,
lead them through this. So I
mm-hmm.
remember swinging the door, taking a deep breath. I swung the door open and I started my briefing. I let my training kick in and I focused my attention on them and what they needed in the moment. And that carried through as I got them on the airplane. I remember at like 3,000 feet opening the door so they can start feeling the wind rush in. So it's one less stimulus that they have to worry
Right.
about. And so I just fell into this as I started thinking about being of service. And so the same thing happens when I'm with my kids. I notice that if I am rushing and I can't get present, I am not looking at them. I'm looking everywhere but them.
You're all
But the
over the
minute,
place.
exactly, exactly. But the minute I sink down and I look them in the eyes, everything melts away. Like
Yeah.
as soon as I think about being in service or being with other people and shifting the spotlight out of me onto someone else, it really helps me get present more than anything else. The community aspect does.
I love that example and thinking about your kids and especially when they're small, right? So you like literally go down and look them in the eye. You mentioned like that to-do list, right? Like all the things we have in our heads. And when we look at our kids, hopefully, and like really take them in, hopefully that just shifts the perspective or shifts the spotlight onto what's really important right now. Right. And at some point in your life, it is going to be that professional self, as when you have, it seems like people's lives in your hands and you're jumping out of an airplane. You're telling everybody, what to do. But with your child, you really, that at that moment in time, they are the most important things. And it gets rid of that outside, like that clutter, that noise that we have, and makes us realize what's more important right here, right now. And that's just magical. And we don't want to lose those moments, especially when our kids are so little.
Yes, yes, 100%. And it took me some time to get there. It took a
Mm.
lot of practice, but it gets easier and easier as you go, as you practice.
So, so, so good. If you are a YouTube watcher, I hope that you just see this Kool-Aid smile on my face because as I say that, I'm thinking about my infant, right? And my tween, and really thinking about, oh my goodness, like the time is just flying and we don't want to lose out on these moments, not only with our kids, but with our partners, significant others, with our families, because when you really think about it, life is short and it really goes by in a flash. So we want to take in and really appreciate every single moment that we have. So, with that being said, Tanya, if you could be remembered for one thing in life, what would that be?
Hmm. This one's an easy one because my business was born out of this.
Mm,
I want people, when they think of me, as someone who lived fully regardless of what season of life I was in or what age I was in. And I just have to share this real quick because I actually wear an anchor necklace.
Yes.
It symbolizes two things. I got this during the pandemic when I was juggling my 2-year-old and work, and it was just, I just needed to be grounded more. And this was my reminder to take control of what I could control. But it was also, my dad was in the Navy and he passed
Oh,
away when I was pregnant with my first kid. And he was the one that always brought me back down, right? He was the one that reminded me, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? So he was my anchor and he reminded me to anchor myself so that I can chase after my big, ambitious dreams and goals. And one of the things he used to always say to me growing up was, I love how much you fully embrace life. And he's like, every time I hear that Leanne Rhymes song, I think
oh,
of you. When I get the choice to sit it out or dance, I hope you dance.
hope you
And that's how
dance.
he toasted me and my husband at our wedding. And I just want to fully embody that. And I want those around me to do the same.
So, so, so good. I'm like to swallow to like fight back the tears there. Thank you for sharing that. That's so, so very sweet. And remember, regardless of what stage in life, in motherhood, in your professional life that you are, I hope you dance. I really hope you dance. And I hope that everyone really takes the opportunity to be present and appreciate the moments as we have them, because one day we will no longer have them. So, Tanya, I thank you. I thank you for sharing your stories and your tips. And I know that they're going to resonate with moms because we all go through these things regardless of where we are in the world. There's similarities that we go through, and I'm sure it's going to resonate with a lot of moms. But before you go, I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to bring people back to you and the work that you do. So where can we find you?
Yeah. So my website, all my handles for Instagram and for LinkedIn are Tanya Ann Chavez with an E, Ann with an E. And you can find me on I'm mostly active on LinkedIn. I'm starting to get my Instagram up, and I do have my website up and running. The thing that I love, I always knew that skydiving was my origin story. That's why I cared so much about leadership, human potential. That's how I got into this space. And now I'm giving people a sneak peek of what that could look like
Ooh.
as I start to host indoor skydiving workshops for people who want to become better leaders and help people grow through overcoming their skydives.
So good. I may have to go out there and visit you one day and do indoor skydiving. That sounds like a lot of fun.
It is much safer than regular skydiving and not as much preparation involved, but
Great
still
baby step.
extraordinarily fun. Yes.
That's awesome. And I believe you have something for listeners today.
I do. I have a guide in case you need some practical tips to be able to squeeze in ways to calm your nervous system down and get back into a flow state. And it's 11 ways to keep your fear in check.
I love that because it fits right into everything we talked about today. So, Tanya, thank you so much. We will be sure to place everything in the show notes so that people know exactly where to find you. Thank you for the freebie. And I really loved getting to know your story some more. And I thank you for being so practical with it because, again, it applies to us all. So, you are very much appreciated.
Oh, well, thank you. It was such a pleasure to have this conversation with you. And I love all the work you do about being mindful because that it really is everything.
Thank you. Thank you. Talk to you soon.
All right.
Thank you again to Tanya for spending some time with us. And for today's guided meditation, I'd like for you to think about the message that you heard. There were a lot of tidbits in there. Hopefully, you got something that resonated with you and that you can take home. And most importantly, above all, apply, right? Don't just let it sink into your head, but apply it into your own life. And two things that I wanted to point out that we really was mentioned, but we really didn't get into is the concept of grace. Give yourself grace when things aren't perfect. Allow the what is so that you can just continue and not get stuck in one space. So, the concept of grace, and when it comes to the concept of fear, I'd like for you to try on the approach of do it scared. Want to open up a new business? Want to fly to a new part of the world? Want to apply for that job or ask for the promotion? Do it scared. You never know what's on the other side of that, but you have to take the plunge, pun intended, after we talked about skydiving. Take the plunge and do it scared because without risks, you don't have that reward. And I am sure there are a lot of rewards waiting for you on that other side if you just do it. My friends, thank you for listening in. And remember that in a world where you are free to be anything that you want to be, you are always free to be mindful. Catch you next week. I hope you enjoyed this week's show. It would mean a ton if you took this moment to review the Free to Be Mindful podcast on the platform you catch your favorite shows. That quick and easy act lets me know what you enjoy, and it helps others find the podcast too. And of course, don't forget to subscribe so you can listen along next week. In the meantime, I welcome you to catch me on social media at Counselor V de Jesus. And as always, remember, in a world where you are free to be anything that you want to be, you are always free to be mindful. Catch you next week.